Okzi appeared in the doorway, his face in shadow. "Are you ill? I have a little heat," she said, almost apologizing. He stepped closer, placed his palm on her forehead, and pulled it away quickly, as if the heat had burned him. "You are hot. Did you tell Nenna?" "I told her I did not feel strong." He sighed and looked toward the main hut. Then he looked at the child, who always found corners to disappear into. After a slow breath, he called out, "Nenna." Once upon a time, in a small peaceful village surrounded by rolling farmlands and tall palm trees, there lived a man named Okzi. He was known for his honesty, strength, and the wisdom that made people often come to him for advice. His compound was large, with 3 huts facing each other, and a big udala tree standing in the middle, its branches stretching wide like the arms of a mother ready to embrace her children. Okzi had once been a happy man. His first wife, Obianuju, had been the light in his home, soft-spoken, gentle, and hard-working. Their marriage was full of laughter and quiet understanding. But the gods, it seemed, had written another story for them. On a night heavy with rain and thunder, Obianuju gave birth to their first child, a baby girl. As the first cry of the child filled the air, Obianuju's breath faded away like smoke from a dying fire. The next morning, the village woke to mourn her. The women gathered to wail, their voices rising and falling like waves. Okzi sat beside his wife's lifeless body, tears cutting lines through the dust on his face. He looked at the small child wrapped in a piece of old cloth beside her mother's mat and felt his heart tear in two. "Why did you leave me, Obianuju?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Why did you leave our child to face this world alone?" The baby stirred slightly, as if she understood his pain. That was the moment he named her Chinelo, meaning God thinks for me. For months, Okzi tried to care for the baby himself, with the help of his aged mother, Mama Okzi. The old woman's hands trembled as she bathed the child, and her eyes were always red from lack of sleep. "My son," she told Okzi one evening as they sat by the fire, "you cannot raise this child alone. The girl needs a woman's hand, and you need peace in this house. The child's cry brings back too many memories for you. You must take another wife." Okzi had refused at first. The thought of another woman filling Obianuju's place made him uneasy. But the days turned into months and the child grew. The compound, once filled with laughter, became quiet, except for Chinelo's occasional cries. The farm suffered. His clothes went unwashed and his food often got burnt. At last, Okzi agreed. That was how Nenna came into his life. She was a widow from the next village, tall, graceful, and confident. Her first husband had died young, leaving her without children. Her eyes were sharp, her voice firm. She carried herself like someone who knew her worth. The day she came to Okzi's compound, the villagers nodded approvingly. "Ah, this woman will bring order back to this house," they said. "Okzi has chosen well." And indeed, at first she did. The compound came alive again. Nenna was a hard worker. She woke early, swept the yard clean before dawn, cooked Okzi's food on time, and ensured everything was in its place. She treated visitors with respect and never raised her voice in public. But behind closed doors, things were different. To her, Chinelo was not a child of the home, but a constant reminder that another woman had once been here, a woman whose shadow still lingered in Okzi's eyes. The little girl grew quietly, unaware of the full depth of the resentment around her. She had inherited her late mother's soft eyes and smile. She was thin and fragile, but always curious. She liked to play under the udala tree, watching the fruits fall and roll on the ground. Sometimes she spoke to herself in whispers, pretending her mother was there, "Ne, did you see the big udala fruit that fell today?" she would say to the air, her small hands clutching the fruit tightly. "I will keep it for you." One evening, when Chinelo was about 5, Okzi returned from the farm late. His clothes were dusty, and his machete hung loosely by his side. He found Nenna sitting by the fire, her face tight with anger. "Where is the child?" she asked coldly. Okzi looked around. "Which child? Which child?" Nenna mocked. "Your precious Chinelo. Who else? I sent her to fetch water from the stream hours ago, and she is not back yet." Okzi frowned. "The stream is far. She is still small. Why did you send her alone?" Nenna's eyes flashed. "Small? She eats from my pot, does she not? She wears clothes bought with my money. She is old enough to fetch a pot of water. You spoil her too much, Okzi." Before he could reply, a small figure appeared at the entrance, struggling to carry a half-filled pot of water. Her little arms trembled. As soon as she stepped inside, her foot caught a stone and the pot slipped, shattering on the ground. The water spilled, soaking Nenna's wrapper. There was silence. Then came the slap. It landed hard and sharp, echoing through the compound. Chinelo fell to the ground, her cheek red and her eyes wide with shock. "Stupid girl," Nenna shouted. "Do you know how far that stream is? You wasted my time and now you waste the water." Okzi rushed forward and held her arm. "That's enough, Nenna." "Enough!" she snapped, pulling away. "You think I will raise her to become lazy like her mother? Not in my house." Okzi's jaw tightened. "You will not speak ill of the dead in my presence." Nenna looked at him coldly. "Then maybe you should have married her ghost instead." That night, Chinelo sat outside under the udala tree, holding her swollen cheek. The moonlight fell softly on her face. Okzi came out quietly and sat beside her. "I am sorry, my daughter," he said gently. "Forgive her. She means well, even if she is harsh." Chinelo looked at him with wet eyes. "Papa, did I make her angry?" Okzi sighed, unable to meet her gaze. "No, my child, you did nothing wrong. Life is just not always fair." She leaned on his arm, and for a brief moment, he felt the warmth of Obianuju beside him again. Days turned into months, and Chinelo grew quieter. She learned to move carefully, to avoid her stepmother's eyes. She did her chores without complaint, and spoke only when spoken to. The only time she smiled freely was when she was alone under the udala tree. The villagers noticed her silence. "That child carries sorrow in her eyes," said one woman to another at the market. "Her stepmother's heart is too hard," replied the other. "May the gods watch over her." But Okzi heard none of this. He was too busy with his farm, too weary from life's weight. When he returned home each evening, Nenna always had his food ready and his bed neat. She treated him with respect in front of others, and he clung to that peace, pretending not to see what was happening in the shadows. Then came a day that changed everything. It was the season of the New Yam Festival. The whole village buzzed with excitement. Drums sounded from every corner, and laughter filled the air. Okzi killed a goat to celebrate, and Nenna prepared a feast. She made pounded yam and rich soup, her hands moving quickly as she stirred the pot. Chinelo stood quietly by the door, watching. "Nenna," Okzi said cheerfully, "let the child eat with us today. It is a day of joy." Nenna forced a smile. "Of course, my husband." But when Okzi went out to greet his neighbors, she turned to Chinelo. "You will eat later," she said sharply. "Go and wash the calabashes behind the hut." Chinelo nodded silently and walked away. Hours passed before Okzi returned. When he noticed Chinelo missing from the feast, he asked, "Where is she?" "She ate already," Nenna lied smoothly. But when night fell and the moon rose, Okzi found Chinelo asleep behind the hut, her small stomach growling with hunger, her arms folded tightly around her chest. He lifted her gently, carried her inside, and laid her on a mat. As he looked at her sleeping face, he felt something heavy settle in his chest. He could no longer pretend not to see. In the days that followed, Okzi began to speak less to Nenna. He spent more time with Chinelo, teaching her to plant yam seedlings, to recognize good soil, and to tell stories by the fire. The bond between father and daughter grew stronger, and Nenna's bitterness deepened. She watched them from a distance, her eyes narrowing each time she saw them laugh together. One afternoon, she muttered to herself, "That girl will ruin everything." And the gods, listening from above, began to stir the winds of fate, winds that would soon shake the peace of Okzi's household forever. The moon rose again over the quiet village, casting long shadows across the compound. The udala tree stood still, its branches heavy with fruit, as if waiting for the storm that everyone else could feel, but no one dared to speak of. And under that tree, little Chinelo sat, her eyes turned toward the sky, whispering softly, "Mama, are you watching me?" Her voice trembled, carried by the night breeze, a lonely echo in the darkness, a child's plea that would soon awaken the spirits of the past. The sun rose slowly over the red roofs of Umuahia village, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The cocks had crowed long before dawn, and the air smelled of dew, wood smoke, and ripening yam. In Okzi's compound, the first stirrings of morning had begun. Chinelo, now 10 years old, woke to the familiar voice of Nenna, calling her name sharply from outside. "Chinelo, are you still sleeping? The sun will soon be on your head." She sat up quickly, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Her mat was thin, and her wrapper, torn at the edge, barely covered her knees. She looked around the small hut where she slept, an old mud room behind the main house. A broken clay pot sat in one corner, and a small wooden stool leaned against the wall. "I'm coming, Mama," she called softly, though she knew Nenna hated being called Mama. "Don't call me that again," Nenna's voice came through the doorway. "Did I tell you I'm your mother? Hurry and fetch water from the stream before my own children wake." "Yes, Ma," Chinelo murmured, tying her wrapper around her waist. She picked up 2 heavy clay pots and stepped out into the cool morning air. The compound was still quiet except for the faint sound of goats bleating. As she walked through the dusty path that led to the stream, her bare feet touched the cold earth. Birds flew from tree to tree, singing softly. Chinelo liked these early walks, the silence, the cool breeze, the chance to breathe without fear. When she reached the stream, other village girls were already there, laughing as they filled their pots. "Chinelo," called Ifeoma, a lively girl about her age. "You are always early. Does your stepmother let you rest at all?" Chinelo smiled weakly. "She says the early bird catches the clean water." The girls laughed, but Ifeoma frowned. "You should tell your father. My mother says he is a kind man." Chinelo's smile faded. "He is kind," she whispered, "but he doesn't see everything." When she returned to the compound, the sun had risen fully. She placed the pots by the kitchen, her small arms trembling from the weight. Nenna stood nearby, her wrapper tied high above her waist, her hands busy pounding cocoyam in a mortar. "Go and sweep the compound," she ordered without looking up. "And after that, fan the fire so I can cook breakfast for my children." "Yes, Ma," Chinelo replied softly. The compound was wide, and the harmattan wind had scattered dry leaves everywhere. Chinelo picked up her broom and began to sweep. Dust rose around her feet, filling her nose, but she didn't stop. From inside the house, the sound of laughter floated out. Obinna and Ngozi were awake. Obinna, Nenna's first child, was 7, full of mischief and arrogance. He liked to tease Chinelo, calling her Onye Ohu, slave. Ngozi, only 5, copied her brother in everything. When Chinelo entered the kitchen to fan the fire, Obinna stood at the doorway, grinning. "Slave girl, my mother said you should hurry," he said mockingly. Ngozi giggled and threw a piece of cassava at her. Chinelo didn't reply. She crouched near the fire, blowing gently until the flames came alive. Smoke filled her eyes, making them water. She wiped her tears quickly before anyone could notice. Nenna stirred the pot, her face stern. Be careful, Chinelo. If you burn this yam, you will eat ashes today. Yes, ma. Okzi entered the compound just as breakfast was being served. His presence brought a strange calm, as if even the air waited for his words. He had aged. His once broad shoulders now bent slightly, and his eyes carried a quiet sorrow. Good morning, Papa, Chinelo greeted, bowing low. Good morning, my daughter, he replied gently. How are you? I'm fine, Papa. Nenna came out carrying a tray. Welcome, my husband. Your food is ready. He nodded and sat on the wooden stool near the tree. She served him neatly, yam, soup, and palm wine. Obina and Ngozi ran to sit beside him, fighting for his attention. Papa, look at the goat I chased from the farm yesterday, Obina said proudly. Okzi smiled. You are growing strong like your father. Chinelo stood a little distance away, her hands folded. Her stomach rumbled softly, but she said nothing. She knew she would eat only after everyone else had finished. When Okzi was done, he washed his hands and looked toward her. Chinelo, have you eaten? Before she could answer, Nenna spoke quickly. She has eaten, my husband. I gave her some food earlier. Chinelo's lips parted, but she caught Nenna's warning glance and lowered her head. Yes, Papa, she said quietly. Okzi smiled faintly. Good. Make sure you rest later. Rest. The word felt strange to her. Rest was for others, not for her. After breakfast, Nenna handed her a basket. Go to the market and buy palm oil, pepper, and salt. And don't waste time talking to anyone. You hear me? Yes, ma. As Chinelo walked to the market, the sun burned hot above her. Dust clung to her legs and sweat ran down her neck. But she didn't complain. She passed by groups of laughing children, mothers pounding yam, and men carving wood under the shade. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere. She wondered what it felt like to be loved openly, without fear. At the market, she greeted the sellers politely. Ne, good afternoon. Ah, Chinelo, said old Mama Udoka, smiling warmly. You look tired, my child. How is your stepmother treating you? Chinelo forced a smile. She is well. Mama Udoka looked at her closely. Your eyes tell a different story. She packed the items into the basket and slipped an extra cola nut inside. Take this. Eat it later. It will give you strength. Thank you, Mama, Chinelo whispered, her throat tight. By the time she returned home, her legs ached. Nenna was sitting under the tree, braiding Ngozi's hair. You took too long, she said sharply. Did you go to dance at the market? No, Ma. The woman selling pepper delayed me. Nenna stood up, her eyes cold. You think I am a fool? She slapped Chinelo across the face and the basket fell. Palm oil spilled onto the ground. Clean it, she barked. Chinelo knelt immediately, using her wrapper to wipe the oil from the red earth. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. From inside the house, Okzi's voice called out, What is happening? Nothing, my husband, Nenna replied quickly. The girl dropped something, but I have handled it. Okzi didn't come out. He never did. His silence was his shield and her punishment. That night, Chinelo lay awake, staring at the thatched roof. She could hear the faint laughter of Obina and Ngozi from their mother's hut. She turned on her side, her stomach growling. In the dim light, she took out the kola nut Mama Udoka had given her. She bit into it slowly, the bitter taste spreading on her tongue. As she chewed, she whispered softly, Mama, if you are watching, please tell God to help me. A single tear slid down her cheek. Days blended into weeks. Chinelo rose before dawn, swept the compound, fetched water, washed clothes, and cooked. Her small hands became rough and cracked. Yet she never raised her voice, never complained. The villagers noticed her quietness. One afternoon, as she returned from the stream, she saw Okzi sitting alone under the udala tree, his eyes distant. She hesitated, then approached slowly. "Papa," she said softly. He turned, surprised. "Chinelo, you are back." "Yes, Papa." He looked at her for a long moment. "Come and sit." She sat beside him, her eyes on the ground. "You work too hard, my daughter," he said quietly. "I see how early you rise, how you move about this compound like a shadow. I may not speak often, but I see." Her throat tightened. "Then why don't you say something, Papa?" He sighed deeply. Sometimes silence keeps peace in a home. "Peace for who?" she asked in a trembling voice. "For her or for you?" Okzi couldn't answer. The wind rustled the udala leaves above them. He placed his rough hand on her small shoulder. "Forgive me, Chinelo. One day you will understand." But she already did. She understood that love could be quiet, weak, and helpless. That evening, as the sun set behind the palm trees, Chinelo fetched water again. She passed by Obina and Ngozi, playing with their mother near the fire. Nenna laughed as she lifted Ngozi into her lap. The laughter was loud, full, and warm, the kind that had never been meant for Chinelo. She paused for a moment, watching them. Then she turned away, walking slowly toward the stream, her figure small against the dying light. The years would remember her as the child who bore too much too early, who learned to hide her tears behind obedience. But in her heart, something had begun to grow, something strong and silent, like a seed buried deep in red earth, waiting for its time to rise. And the udala tree stood still in the middle of the compound, its roots spreading quietly beneath the soil, as if guarding her secret strength. The wind often arrived first, slipping through the banana leaves, teasing the edges of thatched roofs, and curling along the hard red earth until it found the kitchen wall where a thin mat lay. On that mat, every night, Chinelo rested her head close to the warm ashes. The kitchen was a square of mud and smoke, with a low wooden shelf for pots, a battered tripod for the cooking pot, and a corner where firewood leaned like tired bodies. The fire always died slowly, as if reluctant to sleep, breathing its last with faint orange sighs. Chinelo learned to keep it alive with a quiet hand, one small stick at a time, a careful breath, a palm shielding the ember from a sudden draft. From the main hut, laughter drifted out like a song that refused to make room for new voices. Nenna's chuckle rose and fell. Obina's playful shout came next. Ngozi's high giggle danced across the yard. Sometimes Okzi's voice answered, low and tired, but still warm enough to tell stories of harvest and hunting. The laughter never traveled to the kitchen. It reached the udala tree, touched the goat's pen, and scattered among the plantain stems, but it always stopped a few steps away from the mat by the wall, as though some invisible hand held it back. Chinelo would turn on her side and watch a single spark burn itself into blackness. Her eyes stayed open until the night thinned. Sleep came in brief visits, never staying long. There were sounds in the darkness that demanded attention, geckos tapping along the wall, rats scrabbling behind the mortar, a clay pot settling with a dull pop. Owls called from the grove. Farther off, a drum would speak slowly from another compound where a moonlight gathering ran late. From inside the main hut, a rattle of bracelets, footsteps shifting, a soft exchange of words. Comfort lived there. Out here, a girl wrapped both arms around herself and pretended her mother's breath was the warm air on her face. On some nights, Ifeoma's house felt close enough to touch. Chinelo imagined her friend sleeping under a roof that did not leak, on a mat not so thin. She imagined Ifeoma's mother tucking a wrapper around her daughter's feet. The picture was clear in her thoughts, so clear that the ache behind her ribs was both fierce and gentle. When the ache grew too large, Chinelo hummed a tune Mama Udoka had taught her at the market, a simple song about a traveler and the road. Her voice curled into the dark like smoke. And even if no one listened, the song listened back. "Who are you humming for?" Obinna had asked once, catching her by the kitchen with a lopsided grin. "For the fire," she answered, and he laughed as if she had told a clever joke not meant for her mouth. Okzi rarely stepped into the kitchen after dusk. He would pass the doorway, see the outline of a small figure curled near the wall, and pause. His shadow often stretched across the threshold and then pulled away like a tide. He knew where each child slept. He knew which one woke thirsty and which one kicked the mat. He knew, too, the spot in the yard where his late wife had once sat in the blue of evening, shelling groundnuts while humming a tune that had no words. He kept all of that in the space between steps, between breath and speech. On a harmattan night, when the sky was a pale gray and the dust from the north laid a soft film over faces and windows, Chinelo pushed her mat closer to the ember. The air was sharp and dry. Her lips cracked. She held her hands above the glow and whispered, "Mama, if you are close, breathe on me." The words surprised her because they came out of her mouth without permission. She looked around, ashamed, as if someone had heard. It was only the spoon on the shelf and the soot-stained pot, both silent witnesses. From the main hut came a burst of laughter. Nenna telling a tale about a proud hen that wore beads. Obinna clapped. Ngozi's laugh turned into a cough and then more laughter. Chinelo turned her face to the wall and blinked until her eyes grew wet, not with tears alone, but with heat and dust. Sleep found her at last, and in it, a dream. In this dream, the woman called Obianuju wore a blue wrapper and had hands that smelled like palm oil and soap. In the dream, she did not speak, but she smiled with eyes that understood why a girl would listen to rats or sing to fire. The woman combed Chinelo's hair with her fingers, undoing knotted strands, and said nothing. Silence in the dream felt safe. Then thunder cracked. The dream fled into the roof and rain began. It started with a whisper and became a plan. A strong wind bullied the trees. The first drops fell fast, and soon the water came in sheets. The kitchen roof leaked above the doorway. Chinelo woke to cold on her neck. She sat up, rolled the mat with shaky hands, and pushed it to the driest corner. The ember hissed. She placed a small clay shard over it like a shield and blew, her breath shivering. Water beat the ground outside like the feet of dancers. From the main hut came the drag of a wooden door and a voice. "Nenna, close the window," Okzi said. "The rain is strong." "It is done," Nenna answered, and another voice, Ngozi, murmured something sleepy. Chinelo's corner stayed half dry, which was better than nothing. She folded her legs, tucked her chin, and tried to become small enough to dodge the cold. The ember failed. Darkness took the room slowly. She swallowed and stood, pulled a dry stick from the bundle, and struck 2 stones together. The first spark died, the second too, the third caught and then went out with a weak curl of smoke. She tried again, working with calm hands, refusing hurry because hurry had no power here. The fourth spark held. She fed it carefully until a shy flame rose, warm as a palm on her back. Rain pounded harder. The kitchen smelled of smoke and damp ash. A shape moved in the doorway. "Chinelo," Okzi said quietly, "are you awake?" "Yes, Papa," she whispered, and then wished she hadn't, because the answer made the moment real, gave it a shape that might break. He stepped in, water running from his shoulders down his wrapper. He carried a folded cloth and a small calabash covered with a leaf. He glanced around, searching for the worst leak, then bent, placed the cloth where drops fell most stubbornly, and pushed the mat farther from the drip with his foot. The firelight showed the worry near his eyes and the shame he tried to hide. "Take," he said, handing her the calabash. "Hot water. I warmed it earlier. Drink small." She held it with both hands, grateful for its heat. Thank you, Papa. He hesitated, then unfolded another wrapper from his shoulder and spread it over her knees, tucking the edge under her toes. It is cold, he said. You must keep warm. She nodded. The words stuck in her throat, not from fear, but from the ache that came whenever gentleness arrived late. A question, the same one that visited night after night, pressed against her chest. Papa? Yes. Why do you not tell her to be kind? The rain made a sound like 1,000 beads thrown on the ground. He looked toward the yard as if the answer might be stored under the udala tree, then back at the child with the calabash in her hands and the thin arms he knew too well. Peace in a house is fragile, he said at last, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Sometimes a man chooses quiet so that the roof will not fall. She studied the kitchen wall. The mud had cracks that ran like rivers. The roof still leaks, she said, not to insult him, but because the truth needed air. He closed his eyes briefly, not in anger. I will fix it, he murmured. After a pause, he added, Sleep, my daughter. She watched him turn and leave. He stopped at the doorway and glanced back once, and she almost believed in a different morning. Then he vanished into the rain. The laughter did not return from the main hut. Water found new paths down the eaves, and the ember learned to live again. By day, habits hardened. Chinelo carried firewood, fetched water, scrubbed pots until her fingers wrinkled. At night, she became small so that the wind would miss her body. But the question stayed. Why did her father not speak? Why did a voice as deep as his choose silence? When she asked herself, she tried to answer with proverbs she had learned from elders in the market. A tortoise hides its head and believes it has hidden its whole body. A pot that sees fire every day pretends it does not feel heat. She did not know which saying fit her father best. Each night, she tested a new one and put it down like a stone. One evening, the moon was fat and bright. The compound wore silver. The udala fruit shone like coins tucked into leaves. Chinelo cleaned the last plate, went to her corner, and sat with her knees hugged to her chest. The ember needed no help. It was content. A red eye in the dark. She heard Obina tell a joke he had learned from a wrestler in the square. Papa, the man said the yam saw him and rolled into the bush. Obina shouted, Is that not funny? It is, Okzi replied, warm but tired. Nenna's bracelets clinked. Your tongue will chase the yam away if you do not eat, she teased. Chinelo smiled in the dark, not at the joke, but at the shape of a world where easy talk filled the empty places. She placed her palm near the ember and told it a story in her head. In this story, a child kept two fires, one by night to see, one inside her to feel. The outside fire went out when rain fell, but the inside one did not listen to weather. She rearranged the story again and again until the words fitted like beads on a string. Then she fell asleep. The cold woke her after midnight. A line of wind found the gap under the door and slid across the floor to lie on her ankles. She pulled the wrapper tighter. Feet pattered near the mortar. Rats arguing. She sat up, clapped twice, and they scattered. Silence returned, not empty, but breathing. She was about to lie down when a soft cough crept from her chest. It started small and became a stubborn rhythm. Heat flared in her head. She touched her own forehead and found it warm. Her throat scratched as if a thorn lived there. She swallowed, then coughed again, then again until her ribs ached. She stood slowly and reached for the calabash she used at night, filled it from the water pot, and drank. The water was cold enough to bite. The cough retreated, but the heat stayed. She sank to the mat, wrapped herself, and tried to count her breaths. 1, 2, 3. Her mother would be proud of steady counting, she decided. She smiled at that thought and drifted into a thin, unpleasant sleep where rooms leaned and doors would not open. When morning pushed her eyes apart, her tongue was dry and her joints felt stiff. She rose anyway because morning had no patience for excuses. She swept the yard, hands slow, and tried to ignore the small storm in her chest. Nenna watched her from the doorway. "You move like a snail," Nenna said. "Did the night tie your feet?" "I do not feel strong," Chinelo answered gently. "Strength comes from work." Nenna pointed to the water pots. "Fill them." Chinelo lifted both, one tucked to each hip, and walked toward the stream. The road blurred a little. The sun was kind at first, then bullied. At the water, she met Ifeoma, who stopped laughing mid-sentence when she saw Chinelo's face. "You are hot," Ifeoma said, touching her friend's forehead. "Come to my mother. She will give you leaves to boil." "I must hurry," Chinelo replied. "If I delay, she will be angry." "Then take this." Ifeoma searched her basket and brought out a small bunch of utazi leaves wrapped with grass. "Chew a little. It is bitter, but it helps." Chinelo chewed as she walked, eyes stinging at the taste. She carried the pots, careful with each step. At the compound, she set them down and sat for a moment on the low stool to steady her breath. Nenna frowned. "Who told you to sit?" "I am done with the water." "Then wash the cassava and slice it. The sun will not wait for lazy hands." Chinelo obeyed, saying nothing. She washed, sliced, and spread the pieces on the raffia mat to dry. The world spun once when she stood, and she gripped the edge of the kitchen shelf until it steadied. Her cough returned, louder this time. Ngozi passed by, holding a piece of sugar cane. "You cough like a goat," Ngozi said, not to be cruel, just repeating words she had heard. "Mama says drink hot pepper soup." "Pepper soup needs meat," Obina added from the doorway with a smirk. "Do we waste meat on a girl who sleeps with pots?" "Go away," Chinelo whispered, too tired for anger, and they ran off to chase a lizard by the fence. By evening, the fever eased and then rose again as if it had changed its mind. She dragged her mat near the kitchen door to catch the kind wind from the yard. The ember glowed. She leaned forward to add a stick and her hand trembled. The stick slipped from her fingers and fell across the live coal, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. She flinched backward, breathing hard. Okzi appeared in the doorway, his face in shadow. "Are you ill?" "I have a little heat," she said, almost apologizing. He stepped closer, placed his palm on her forehead, and pulled it away quickly, as if the heat had burned him. "You are hot. Did you tell Nenna?" "I told her I did not feel strong." He sighed and looked toward the main hut. Then he looked at the child, who always found corners to disappear into. After a slow breath, he called out, "Nenna." She answered from inside, her voice smooth. "Yes, my husband." "Make a small soup with pepper and scent leaves," he said. "Chinelo is not well." There was a pause. "As you say." Chinelo kept her eyes on the ember. "Thank you," she said to the coal rather than to him. He stood there a moment longer. "Your mother had a cough like this once during Harmattan," he said softly. She sang to beat it. She said songs clear the chest. "What song?" Chinelo asked, not accusing, just curious, hungry for any crumb of history. "A little tune," he replied, and hummed something simple, a line that rose and fell like breath itself. His voice trembled. She found the pattern and hummed along, and for a very brief stretch of time, the kitchen wall, the main hut, the udala tree, and the sky seemed to listen together. Nenna came to the doorway with a small bowl. "Soup," she said, placing it on the floor. "Drink it hot." Chinelo lifted the bowl, sipped, and felt heat slide into her chest. She nodded. "Thank you," she said to the bowl. Nenna watched her face for a second, then turned to Okzi. "The child must still wake early," she said. "Work does not wait for fevers." "Let her rest tomorrow," he answered quietly. Nenna's lips tightened, but she did not argue. "As you wish." When she left, the silence stayed. Okzi shifted his weight and cleared his throat. He looked like a man who wished to say more, but could not find the right basket to carry the words. At last he said, "Sleep." "I will." He went away. The embers sighed, and Chinelo drank another sip. The soup warmed her bones, and the fever loosened its hold. She lay back and watched the beam of moonlight that slid through the crack in the door and landed like a narrow river on the floor. She imagined her mother walking along that river, soft-footed, patient, coming closer with each step. "Did you hear the song?" Chinelo whispered to the air. "I will keep it." In the days that followed, her cough faded, though not at once. She returned to the stream, the broom, the fire. Nights resumed their old order. Laughter in one house, quiet in another. But something small had changed. Now, when she lay down, she hummed the tune he had given her as if it were a thread from a cloth she had lost. She pulled it through the needle of her throat and stitched the edges of darkness together until they no longer unraveled so easily. One night, she woke to the smell of rain again. The roof held this time. She smiled into the dark and spoke to the ember. "I can take care of us," she told it. "You and me." The ember glowed as if it agreed. She curled under her wrapper and thought of Ifeoma's face at the stream, of Mama Udoka's steady kindness, of her mother's silent hands in a dream, of her father's song. She gathered these things like shells and arranged them in her mind, a small shrine that no one could knock down. If she listened closely, she could still hear the laughter from the main hut, but it no longer arrived like a stone. It came like a sound from another road, busy and bright, not meant for her path tonight. Perhaps one day roads would join, perhaps not. She accepted that uncertainty and slept. A day came when the moon was thin and shy, hiding behind tall clouds. That night, a goat broke its rope and wandered into the kitchen, sniffing at the ashes. Chinelo woke with a start and sat up. "Gba puo," she whispered, waving her hand. The goat blinked, sneezed at the smoke, and trotted out, hooves clicking on the hard ground. She laughed softly to herself and lay back down. The sound of her own laughter surprised her. It was not loud, not foolish, but it lived and it did not ask permission. Later, she heard the door of the main hut open and close. Footsteps crossed the yard. The steps paused near the kitchen door. She kept her eyes shut, not from fear, but to see what a moment would do if left alone. The steps retreated. A wrapper was placed near her feet, folded and new. Morning showed it clearly, brown with a thin pattern of white lines. She touched it, traced the lines with a finger, then folded it carefully and slipped it under her head as a pillow. She did not ask who had left it. Some gifts needed no names. By and by, the nights continued to come with their small tests and small mercies. When wind crept under the door, she tucked the edge of her mat into the wall crack. When rats whispered near the mortar, she clapped once, and they obeyed. When laughter rose from the main hut, she let it pass like a traveling group, singing on its way to the next square. When silence settled, she filled it with the old song and a new promise. "I am my own shelter," she told the ember, "but I will not harden into stone. I will stay warm enough to welcome kindness when it comes." The ember flared, then settled. She slept, and in sleep, the woman in the blue wrapper visited again, not to speak, not to gather tears, but to sit. They sat together, a mother and a daughter who had never met, sharing the kind of quiet that did not hurt. When morning came, the dream rose into the light with her, and she carried it through the day like a secret bowl filled with clean water. One evening soon after, as stars pierced the dusk one by one, Okzi stood under the udala tree, watching the kitchen door. His hands were behind his back. He did not enter. He simply stood, and perhaps he listened for a tune he had once hummed in a kitchen where it never landed before. He might have heard it, or he might have heard only the night. Either way, the fire inside the small room kept its promise. The girl on the mat slept near its glow, not because she had no place else to go, but because she knew how to make a small light hold back the dark. And that knowledge, though no one clapped for it, was a kind of comfort all by itself. The years slipped by quietly, one planting season folding into another. The udala tree in Okzi's compound had grown broader, its branches thick and full, shading the yard like a giant umbrella. Beneath its shadow, life went on, unhurried yet heavy with the kind of silence that holds many secrets. Chinelo had become a young woman now, no longer the thin, timid child who slept beside the kitchen wall. Her body carried the shape of womanhood, graceful but modest. Her face, though calm and often serious, held a kind of beauty that was gentle rather than loud, a beauty that spoke softly and lingered quietly in people's minds. The villagers noticed it first. "Ewo," said Mama Udoka one morning as Chinelo greeted her on the way to the market. "This girl has become her mother's image. That same calm spirit, the same kind eyes. Time truly walks fast." "Yes, Mama," Chinelo said, smiling shyly. "You always remember my mother." "How can I forget?" the woman replied. "Obianuju was like cool water on a hot day. You carry her grace in you, my child." Chinelo thanked her and continued down the narrow path, her basket balanced neatly on her head. But even as she walked, she felt the weight of those words. Not pride, but something tender, fragile, and a little sad. Back in Okzi's compound, Nenna watched her from a distance. She stood by the doorway, her eyes following the younger woman's every step. The sunlight caught Chinelo's skin, glowing like polished wood. The girl's laughter, when she spoke to the children fetching firewood, floated easily through the air. Nenna's face tightened. "She walks as if the ground is soft beneath her," she muttered under her breath, "as if this is her father's house alone." From inside the hut, Obina's voice called out, "Mama, have you seen my red cloth? The one I keep for festivals." "Check by the calabash," she snapped, still staring outside. Obina, now a tall, strong boy of 17, had inherited his mother's proud manner. He was bold, sometimes careless, and often too aware of his own importance. Ngozi, a bright and restless girl of 15, spent her days learning how to weave mats and dreamt of marriage to a rich man. In their mother's eyes, they were the only rightful heirs to Okzi's name. Chinelo, though quiet and hard-working, was still the daughter of another woman, a ghost that refused to fade. That evening, when Chinelo returned from the market, the compound was alive with talk. A young man from the next village, Ekene, had stopped by earlier, asking for Okzi. He was known for his steady work in the cocoa farm and his polite manners. The villagers had begun to whisper that he had been seen talking to Chinelo near the stream on several mornings. "Papa, good evening," Chinelo greeted as she entered, setting her basket down. Okzi looked up from where he sat, mending a broken hoe. "Evening, my daughter. How was the market?" "It was fine. I sold all the cassava, and Mama Udoka said she will buy more next week." "Good," he said, nodding. "Sit. You look tired." Before she could sit, Nenna's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "She should not sit before washing her hands. Does she want to bring market dust into my kitchen?" Chinelo turned immediately. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'll wash first." When she was gone, Nenna folded her arms and looked at Okzi. "Did you hear what they said at the market square?" He frowned slightly. "I hear many things. Which one do you mean?" "They say that young man from Umuike village, Ekene, is asking about Chinelo, that he wants to bring kola nuts soon." Okzi paused, then smiled faintly. "Ekene is a good boy, hard-working, respectful." "Good boy?" Nenna repeated with disbelief. "And you will let him marry her just like that, without thinking how people will talk?" "What will they say?" he asked calmly. "They will say she is more favored than my own daughter," she hissed. "They will say the daughter of the dead woman has found joy before mine." Okzi sighed. "You think too much of what others say. If Ekene is serious, he will bring his people. We will see then." Nenna turned away, biting her lip. "You will see," she muttered under her breath. That night, as Chinelo sat by the kitchen, washing plates, Nenna approached her quietly. "So," she began, her tone cold and measured, "you now speak to men by the stream." Chinelo looked up quickly, startled. "Mama, I did not. Do not lie to me," Nenna barked. "The whole village is talking. Have you no shame? Do you want to disgrace this household?" Chinelo's voice trembled. "He only greets me, Mama. He helps carry the water sometimes when my pot is heavy." "Ah!" Nenna clapped her hands mockingly. "So now you cannot carry your own pot. Is that what your beauty is for?" Tears welled in Chinelo's eyes. "I never meant any harm." "Go inside," Nenna said sharply, "before I lose my temper. And tomorrow, you will not go to the stream alone. Ngozi will follow you. Do you hear me?" "Yes, Ma," Chinelo whispered. When she left, Nenna stood there, her chest rising and falling with quiet fury. She felt as though the ground itself was turning against her. Her own daughter was still a child, yet this one, the one who had brought sorrow to her husband's house years ago, was now the one men noticed. In the following weeks, the bitterness grew. Nenna found reasons to scold Chinelo for everything. The soup too salty, the water not clear enough, the broom too short. Sometimes she made her repeat tasks late into the night, sweeping the same ground again and again. Okzi saw the exhaustion on his daughter's face, but he said little. He had grown older and quieter. His shoulders stooped with the weight of unspoken things. When he did speak, it was often to change the subject or to calm the storm, not to face it. One afternoon, as the sun sank low, Chinelo was in the backyard splitting firewood. Her wrapper clung to her knees with sweat. Obinna approached, leaning on a stick. "Chinelo," he said lazily, "Mama said you should fetch palm nuts from the store." She nodded. "I will do that after this." He watched her for a while, a strange smile on his face. "They say men want to marry you. You should not think too high of yourself." "I do not," she replied softly. "You should remember you are not truly of this house," he said with a smirk. "When Papa dies, everything belongs to us." She looked at him then, her gaze calm but steady. "You may have the house," she said quietly, "but I have peace." Obinna frowned, not sure if she had insulted him or pitied him. He turned and left, muttering under his breath. That evening, Nenna gathered her children close. "You must never let her rise above you," she whispered fiercely. "That girl is cunning. She hides her pride behind silence. But I see through it. I will not watch her take what belongs to us." The words were seeds, and she planted them deeply. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers of Chinelo's beauty spread through the village like the scent of ripe fruit. Men spoke her name at the palm wine joint, their voices hushed but eager. Women praised her modesty, but watched with wary eyes, knowing how beauty could stir both admiration and trouble. One evening, Eken finally came again, bringing kola nuts and palm wine to greet Okzi properly. He stood tall, his manner respectful. "My father sends his greetings," he said, bowing slightly. "I have come to ask for your daughter's hand, if it pleases you." Okzi looked thoughtful. "We will think on it," he said. "Come again after the next market day." Nenna sat silently through it all, her face still as stone. But when Ekene left, she followed Okzi inside and shut the door. "Have you lost your senses?" she demanded. "You want to give her away so she can shine while my own daughter remains unseen?" "This is not about you or me," Okzi replied. "The girl has worked hard. She deserves peace." Nenna's voice dropped low. "As long as I breathe, she will not have more than my children. If she leaves, it will not be in pride. It will be in shame." Okzi looked at her, sadness filling his eyes. "Your jealousy will destroy this house, Nenna." "Then let it," she hissed and stormed out. That night, Chinelo could not sleep. She lay under the udala tree, the air thick with the scent of ripe fruit. She heard her father's sigh from his hut, and her heart ached for him. She heard her stepmother whispering with Ngozi, and her body tensed. She stared up at the stars and spoke softly. Mama, if you can see me, pray that I stay kind, even when the world is not kind to me. A soft wind blew through the leaves, brushing her cheek like a hand she remembered from dreams. She closed her eyes and let it comfort her. The next morning, she rose before dawn, swept the compound, and fetched water before anyone stirred. When the first light touched the ground, she stood by the stream, her reflection trembling in the water. I will not hate her, she whispered. Hatred is too heavy. Behind her, Ifeoma's voice called out, Chinelo, you look like the morning itself. Chinelo smiled. The morning doesn't belong to anyone, Ifeoma. It just comes. As they walked home together, laughter rippled between them, small and free, the kind that belonged to those who had survived too much to let bitterness win. And though jealousy grew like a shadow behind her, Chinelo's heart remained steady, her light undimmed. For the more Nenna's envy spread, the more Chinelo's quiet grace refused to break. Under the udala tree that evening, Okzi watched her from afar, her figure moving gently in the golden glow of sunset. His chest ached with both pride and regret. He whispered to the wind, Obianuju, your daughter has your strength. The leaves rustled in reply, soft and understanding. And the house, though trembling with envy, stood still beneath the weight of its secrets, waiting for the day when truth would finally break its silence.